Hey friends, this is Karen from Blue Rooster Farm, and today we are going to be talking about apples. And it is that time of year, it's the middle of October, and I have all of these apples from our apple tree that I need to work up. So if you want to see what we're going to do with these apples, stick around. Thanks for sticking around. Well, as you see here, I've brought in some apples, and this is just a small amount of what I'm going to be working up today. I am going to peel and slice as many apples as I can, and I am using my KitchenAid peeler slicer, and it is an easy way to get all of this done quickly. Now, if you don't have this, you can also use the hand cranked apple peeler slicer, or just do it by hand. And I've done that for many years until I was able to get this or the hand turned slicer. As I'm peeling my apples, the peels drop into the stainless steel bowl below, and then I have another large bowl that I've filled with water, and I've added a couple of teaspoons of citric acid. Now, that is being used to keep the apples from turning brown as I'm peeling all of these. You don't have to add citric acid. If you don't have it, you can use lemon juice or some of the fruit fresh. That also works. Since I'm peeling so many apples, it's going to take a while, so this just helps my apples stay nice looking. With part of the apples that I sliced and peeled, I am going to dehydrate, and I am just laying them out on the food dehydrator. I'm not doing anything to them. I chose to go ahead and slice them into halves, so half rings, and they just seem to fit better on the dehydrator, and they will be a good size to snack on. So with the dehydrated apples, we use them just to snack on, and also you can add them to baked goods like scones, breads, things like that that you don't want that extra moisture. So here I am just filling up all of the trays of the dehydrator. Now I am putting them quite close together because they will shrink a lot. So go ahead and put them close together. It will take a little longer the more you have, but I'd rather just get them all on there and let it run longer than to do this multiple times. Here's my first dehydrator full, and I will be turning this on at about 135 degrees, and I'm sure this will go overnight, and I will check them in the morning. With the rest of those sliced apples, I am putting them in the Instapot, and I am pressure cooking them for just a few minutes to get them all softened. Now I'm going to do this 5 times. I have 5 batches of apples that I'm going to cook down. And as you can see, each batch fills the pot, but once they're cooked, they shrink up considerably. So I've got this on, and we're going to be making some applesauce, and this time we're going to be canning the applesauce. After I had all of my apples cooked down, I put them all back into my Instant Pot, and I added back as much liquid as I needed to make the applesauce the consistency that I liked. So you can add more liquid, less liquid, whatever consistency of applesauce you like. The rest I just put in a pitcher, and we enjoyed as a juice, and it was delicious. No sugar, nothing. It was just apple juice. And you can see that I'm using my hand blender here, and I'm just getting it to the consistency that we like. You can have it a fine consistency, you can have it chunky. It's whatever consistency you prefer. Now, on my video for making raspberry applesauce, if you'll remember, we just froze that applesauce. Well, today we are canning this applesauce. And when you're canning, it's important to have the correct acidity when you're water bath canning or steam canning. And so we need to add some lemon juice to this. Now, I followed the ball recipe, and I will put the link below in the description box. And it requires you to add 3 tablespoons of lemon juice for 7.5 to 10.5 pounds of apples, and that's about 22 to 32 medium. So I figured when I was doing this recipe, this was about 2 to 3 times that amount of apples. So I had to add, I believe it was about a half a cup of of lemon juice. But you can go to this recipe and figure out how much you need to add. And that acidity is very important. Some apples have plenty of acidity, some of them do not have as much. So we just need to be safe when canning and make sure that we preserve it correctly so that it will stay shelf stable. Now, we also have an option for sugar. You can leave your applesauce with no sugar, and I do that a lot, especially on apples that are sweet. But these apples, because we've had such dry weather, they didn't sweeten up as much as we would have liked. And so I am going to add some sugar to these. And the recipe for ball says for the 7.5 to 10.5 pounds of apples, you can add 1 3/4 to 2.5 cups of sugar. Now that's a lot of sugar, and it will taste sweeter once it's cooled. So we don't use nearly that amount. I do add some and I taste it and decide whether or not it is the right amount for us. But you get to choose how much sugar you want to add. There's no set amount, it's all to taste. So once you have the sugar added, you just need to make sure that it starts bubbling. And so we need to bring it to a boil. And you do have to be careful here because you don't want it to scorch. That will ruin your whole batch. So you do need to make sure that you are stirring. Now, once it comes to a boil, then we can start putting it into jars. Now, you can can applesauce in pint-sized jars, or you can can it in quart-sized jars. I like to do quart just because we're going to have a lot of applesauce and it will save me lids, and we can open up a jar and we can eat on it for a week. And so that is fine with me. So that's what we're going to do. Now we're placing the applesauce into our quart-sized jars. The jars do not have to be sterilized. Anything processed more than 10 minutes will not need to be sterilized because it will be sterilized in the processing. So I am filling up the jars to about a 1/2 of an inch headspace, and sometimes I leave it just a little less than a 1/2 of an inch. But right here, I put it close, and then I'm going to debubble, and then I'll fill it to the 1/2 of an inch headspace. So right now, I'm just getting it close, but not worrying about it being perfect right now. I love to have plain applesauce on hand, but I also really enjoy having some fruit flavored applesauces. And so here are some sweet cherries that we had purchased earlier in the summer, and I had pitted them and froze them. And I'm going to add a couple of handfuls to the remaining applesauce. And these, like I said, are frozen and they are the sweet cherries. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stir them in and I'm going to let them warm up, and then I'm going to puree them so that we can have cherry flavored applesauce. And it is really, really good. While those cherries are softening up and heating up, I'm going to go ahead and get the plain applesauce debubbled and the headspace correct and get the lids on all of these jars. and set them in the steam canner. I'm going to use a wooden skewer to help debubble, and we want to get the bubbles out so that it will seal correctly. And depending on how thick your applesauce, depends on how much you need to debubble. And so I'm just using this to swirl it around a little bit and get any bubbles that may have formed out. Sometimes right around the shoulders you'll get a bubble or two when you're canning something thick. So I've got those all out, and then I'm going to top it off to make sure my headspace is correct. Remember, when canning, it's really important that your rims are very clean. We need to make sure that seal touches that rim and seals correctly. So here I am using a paper towel dipped in vinegar, and that vinegar helps to break down the sugars and get that off of that rim, because applesauce does have a tendency to stick really well on those rims. This is also the perfect time to run your finger around the rim to make sure there's no nicks or chips in that rim. Now we can put the lids on top of the jars, and then we're going to add the rings. And when you're adding your ring, just tighten it fingertip tight. Do not wrench it down, and also make sure that it's down enough so that you have a good contact between the lid and the jar. These jars will be placed on the steam rack while the cherry applesauce is being made. You may have noticed the applesauce bubbling a little while we were filling the regular applesauce into the jars. So this is very hot now, and all I need to do is puree it up with my handheld blender. So as I hit it with the blender, you can see how pretty this applesauce is going to be. Pinkish red, very pretty color. I'm just pureeing it until those cherries are all incorporated and no chunks of them are left. And again, we just need to make sure this is hot all the way through, and we can start canning this as well. And we'll fill these jars the same as we filled the regular applesauce. A ½ inch headspace. We'll be sure to debubble, clean the rims, and put the rings on fingertip tight. Isn't that such a pretty color? So we're going to add these jars to our canner, and we're going to start processing these jars. Once my steam canner gets to the correct temperature, I will be canning and processing these for 20 minutes. After 20 minutes is up, I will turn the burner off, but let it set untouched for 10 minutes, and then I will open it up and set the jars on the counter to cool. So now it's the next day, and I have brought in all of the dehydrator trays, and the apples are completely dry and ready to be placed into plastic bags. So I'm just going to put these apple slices into a big bowl first, and then I'll put them into a bag. But they are coming off a little tricky here, but I find soon they're once they get a little cooler, they come off real quickly. And I'll just speed this up and let you see how many we have. So from all of those apples that we peeled and sliced, once they're dehydrated, they've just fit nicely into the stainless steel bowl. And we're going to put them in plastic bags, and we end up getting a nice full gallon-size plastic bag, and then a little bit more, maybe a half or a third. These can be stored directly on the pantry shelf at this point, but if you don't plan on eating them right away, I suggest you put them in the freezer. They will stay fresher that way. Now, not only do we like to process and preserve our apples so we can enjoy them throughout the year, we love to eat the apples fresh too. And I'm going to share with you two of our favorite dips for apples. Now, this first one is our very favorite one. It is a caramel dip for apples. Now, you can make this caramel sauce for anything that requires a caramel sauce. It is such an easy recipe, and it is so delicious. It only takes a couple of ingredients, and my sons, when they were in high school, would sometimes make it when we had fresh apples and they needed a snack. So it's very easy. So you're only going to need a few ingredients, and here they are. You're going to need a half a cup of corn syrup, 1 can of sweetened condensed milk, 3/4 cup of packed brown sugar, and 1 stick of butter. So we're going to put the butter in the saucepan, and we are going to get it melting. We're going to go ahead and add that corn syrup. Make sure we get it all in there. This is such a quick recipe. I think it takes less than 10 minutes to get it made. So, and we use it for ice cream toppings. If you cook it longer, it actually makes a harder caramel so that you could make caramels. Then next we're going to go ahead and add that brown sugar. And I did not have that packed in. It is a 3/4 cup of packed brown sugar, and so I just had left it loose in there. And we're going to stir this really well, and it's starting to heat up as we're doing this. The longest part is just getting that stick of butter melted. Once that butter is melted, it is so easy. So I'm just going to help that butter get melted by moving it around. Now you do want to have a good spoon that you can scrape the bottom of the pan with, because as you're cooking it's going to be boiling and you don't want it to scorch. It could scorch if you're not careful. So be sure you're watching it carefully and you are using a spoon or something that can clean the bottom of that pan and keep it from scorching. So we're seeing that it's starting to get hot. It's starting to melt. Now at this point the butter just melted, so we are just getting it hot, and that just took a minute or two to get the butter melted, and it's starting to get pretty hot. And again, you continue to stir. You can see it's kind of thick, but you want to continue to stir so it does not scorch. And now I'm bringing you back at this point because it's just starting to boil. And so once it starts to boil, you want to boil it hard, and you want to keep it stirred and the bottom scraped. So we're going to boil it hard for 2 minutes. So be sure you set your timer and boil it for 2 minutes, stirring constantly. It's been boiling hard for about 2 minutes now, and you can see it's even getting a little thicker. It's about the same color, which is fine. Everything looks good. And now we're going to add our sweetened condensed milk. So we want to pour this in all at once. And when we do this, we still have the burner going, but you want to be careful not to boil it once the sweetened condensed milk has been added. It has a tendency to curdle it, but we can keep our burner going right here because that sweetened condensed milk is cool and it cools down our sauce. So right now I am stirring this in, and I want to heat it back up just to almost boiling, but you don't want to boil it because it will curdle. It is at the stage where it's trying to bubble and boil, so we need to add one final ingredient, and that is our vanilla. And I'm going to add a couple of teaspoons. I'm pretty generous with it. So I'll get that in there real quickly, get it stirred around. Now, once I pull this off the heat, it's important to let it cool down some. This is very, very hot. So once it cools down to the temperature that you like, you can start dipping your apples. And we like to dip them in caramel sauce and peanuts and enjoy it. You can store your leftovers in a jar in the refrigerator, but you will find that it hardens up quite a bit, so you can thin it out by adding a little bit of milk or cream and warming it up in the microwave. This is so good. Our next dip is a nutty apple dip, and it's super quick and easy as well, and no cooking required. So what I have in the bowl is an 8-ounce block of cream cheese that is at room temperature, and I am just stirring it up to make sure that it is all smooth and no lumps in it. Then I'm going to take 1 cup of peanuts that I have chopped up, and you can crush them as finely as you want. And I add those to this cream cheese mixture. And this is going to be pretty dry because of all the peanuts, but it will get stirred in. At first you're thinking, there's no way you're going to get this all mixed in, but you can, especially once the brown sugar is added. So here we have 3/4 cup of brown sugar, and that brown sugar will help that cream cheese become looser, and it will blend in nicely. But you can do this in a mixer if you like. I just didn't want to get another bowl and a mixer dirty since this is so simple. But you can definitely use your stand mixer or a hand mixer with this. So I'm just going to get it all incorporated. And it should turn into a nice thick dip. Now you can use other things besides apples to dip this dip into. You can use little Teddy Grahams, vanilla wafers, any of those things, or other fruit. Now here I am adding some vanilla, and you can add as much vanilla as you want. I probably added a teaspoon plus, but we're going to get that all mixed in and smooth too. But again, this is a really easy recipe, and it tastes so good. Once it's all blended up and you're dipping in it, it tastes like it's caramel. It really does. In fact, when we first tasted it, it's like tastes like there's caramel in here, but it's just cream cheese, brown sugar, and peanuts with a little bit of vanilla. And it is delicious. So I hope you get the chance to try this one. We really enjoy this one too. And the caramel dip, both of them are so good. All right, I have both of our dips, our cream cheese dip and our caramel dip. And of course, apples. So let's try the cream cheese one first. That is really good. Like I said, it tastes like caramel. It tastes like somebody mixed up caramel and put some peanuts in it. Very, very good. And it would be tasty with lots of other things. It's the sweet and the tart, you know. Okay, caramel dip. And look at that caramel dip. Perfect consistency. Now, right now it's still just a little bit warm. And once you put it in the refrigerator, it might harden up, and you can warm it back up in the microwave, and you can add a little cream or a little butter or a little milk if it's still firm. Just a little bit, it doesn't take much. So let's try this. You know, you can't beat caramel. And this is such a good caramel sauce. and it can be used for recipes calling for caramel. You just, cook it a little longer to make it thicker, but very, very good, especially if you had some nuts to dip your caramel apple in. So today we did 2 apple dips, perfect time for apple season, and you're really gonna love these. Thanks for watching my video. If you liked it, please share, like, and subscribe. I would really appreciate that, and it would allow more people to see these videos. Again, thanks for tuning in, and I hope you come back soon. Have a great week.